My name's Lauren, and I'm 32. I'm sitting in my childhood kitchen, the one Dad left me in his will, sipping coffee like it's just another day. This house, every creaky floorboard, is legally mine. My brother Caleb and his new wife Miranda live here rent-free, thinking they own the place. Then Miranda storms in, eyes blazing, calling me a pathetic leech for loitering in her home. I laugh, gripping Dad's old keychain, knowing the truth she doesn't. Have you ever been underestimated in your own space share where you're watching from below? And please like and subscribe to hear how this unfolds. I stood in the living room, sunlight filtering through the old lace curtains. Dad loved my hands, still trembling from Miranda's outburst. The house smelled of her lavender candles, a scent that clashed with the oak and memory I knew so well. Caleb slouched on the couch, scrolling his phone, pretending he hadn't heard her call me a leech. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to ask why he let her talk to me like that. Instead, I picked up a framed photo of us kids, our grins wide under summer freckles, and set it back gently. Miranda swept back in her heels, clicking on the hardwood. She didn't look at me, just started rearranging pillows like she was marking territory. "You're always here," she said, her voice sharp but low, like she was testing me. "Don't you have a life?" I froze, my throat tight. I'd been coming to this house my whole life, and now I was the intruder. I glanced at Caleb, waiting for him to say something, anything. He just coughed and looked away, his fingers tapping faster on his screen. "I'm just visiting," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This is my family's home." Miranda snorted, tossing a pillow down. "Your family? You mean Caleb's? You're just... what, nostalgic?" She turned, her eyes narrowing, and I saw it. She thought she had power here. My chest ached, not just from her words, but from Caleb's silence. He'd always been my little brother, the one I'd defended from bullies, the one who'd cried on my shoulder when Dad got sick. Now he was letting this woman rewrite our history. I walked to the window, needing air, needing space. The street outside was quiet, the maples just starting to turn red. I remembered Dad teaching me to rake those leaves, his laugh echoing as we jumped into the piles. This house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was him, us, everything we'd built. I'd let Caleb and Miranda live here because he was struggling after his last job fell through, because Dad would have wanted me to help. But I never thought it'd come to this. Miranda's voice cut through again. "Honestly, Lauren, it's kind of sad. 32 and hanging around like you're still a kid. Don't you have a job?" My jaw clenched. "I'm a freelance designer," I said, turning to face her. "I work from home. I don't need to justify myself to you." She raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Freelance? Right. Sounds like an excuse to mooch off us." I wanted to laugh, to tell her the truth right then, but something held me back. Maybe it was Dad's voice in my head saying, "Family comes first, even when it hurts." Caleb finally looked up, his face pale. "Hey, let's just chill, okay?" he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. I stared at him, waiting for more, but he went back to his phone. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just Miranda's venom. It was Caleb's betrayal, quiet and gutting. I grabbed my bag, needing to get out before I said something I'd regret. As I reached the door, my phone buzzed. It was Clara, our neighbor, texting, "Heard Miranda talking trash about you at the market. Call me." I stepped onto the porch, the autumn air cool against my flushed cheeks. Clara's message burned in my mind. Miranda was spreading lies, painting me as some deadbeat squatting in their house. I leaned against the railing, remembering how Clara used to bring us cookies when Dad was sick, how she'd always been there. If she was worried, this was bigger than I thought. I looked back through the window, seeing Miranda laugh as she showed Caleb something on her phone. My home, my memories, and she was trying to erase me from them. I walked to my car, my hands shaking as I unlocked it. Part of me wanted to storm back in, wave the deed in her face, and end this. But Dad's words echoed again, "Stand firm but kind." I wasn't sure I could do both. Not yet. I drove to my apartment, the house shrinking in my rear view, but the hurt stayed with me, heavy and raw. Back at my apartment, I dropped my keys on the counter, the clink echoing in the quiet. My place was small, a one-bedroom with mismatched furniture, but it was mine. I sank onto the couch, Clara's text still burning in my mind. Miranda was out there twisting the truth about me to strangers. I pulled out my phone and called Clara, my fingers drumming on the armrest. She picked up on the first ring, her voice warm, but edged with worry. "Lauren." "I'm so glad you called," she said. "I was at the market this morning and Miranda was there talking loud enough for half the store to hear. Said you're some freeloader who won't leave her and Caleb alone." I felt my face flush, humiliation curling in my chest. "Clara, that's not true," I said, my voice tighter than I meant. "I know, honey," she replied. "But she's got folks believing it. You need to watch out." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the ceiling. The market was where Dad used to take us for ice cream, where neighbors knew our names. Now Miranda was turning it into her stage, making me the villain in my own town. I stood and paced my socks, scuffing the worn rug. Part of me wanted to drive back, bang on their door, and lay it all bare. But I knew that'd only make me look like the crazy one. Instead, I went to this closet and pulled out the fireproof safe Dad had given me. Inside was the deed, crisp and official, my name printed clear as day. I traced the words, remembering the lawyer's office 3 years ago, the weight of Dad's trust settling on me. He'd sat me down before he got too sick, his hands steady despite the chemo. "This house is yours, Lauren," he'd said. "You're the one who'll keep it safe." I'd promised him I would, even if it meant putting my own plans on hold. I set the deed on the table, my resolve hardening. Miranda thought she could push me out, but she didn't know the half of it. I poured a glass of water, the coolness grounding me, and sat down to think. Caleb's silence earlier wasn't just cowardice, it was a choice. He was choosing her over me, over our family. The thought stung sharp and deep, like a splinter I couldn't reach. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from my cousin Hannah. "Heard from Aunt June that Caleb's been weird lately. You okay?" I sighed, typing back a quick, "I'm fine, just dealing with some stuff." Hannah would want details, but I wasn't ready to unpack it all. Not yet. I set the phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the streetlights flickering on. The world felt smaller, like the house was the only thing tethering me to who I used to be. I thought about the dinner we'd had last week, the one where Miranda had pushed her plate away and leaned across the table, her voice syrupy but sharp. "You know, Lauren, it's sweet you're so attached to this place," she'd said. "But maybe it's time to move on. Find your own life." Caleb had just nodded, picking at his food, and I'd forced a smile, my fork heavy in my hand. I'd let it slide then, thinking it was just her being her. But now, with Clara's warning, I saw it for what it was, a campaign to erase me. I went back to the deed, folding it carefully and locking it away. Miranda was playing a game she didn't understand, and Caleb was letting her. I wasn't ready to show my hand, not yet, but I wasn't going to let her rewrite my story either. As I turned off the light, the ache in my chest grew heavier, not just for the house, but for the brother I thought I knew. Something was shifting, and I could feel it coming like a storm I couldn't outrun. The next morning I drove back to the house, the weight of Clara's warning and Hannah's text pressing on me. I parked down the street, not ready to face Miranda's smirk. The backyard called me Dad's old garden, patchy, but still alive with his roses. I grabbed a trowel from the shed, needing to dig to feel something solid. The soil was cool, grounding, but my mind churned. Miranda wasn't just talking trash. She was building a case against me, and Caleb was letting her. I was on my knees pulling weeds when her voice cut through the air. "Lauren, what are you doing to my yard?" I looked up, trowel in hand, to see Miranda standing on the deck, arms crossed, her blonde hair pulled tight. "This isn't your yard," I said, standing brushing dirt off my jeans. "It's my family's." She laughed, a sharp cutting sound. "Your family. You're just the sad sister who can't let go. Jealous. I'm making a life with Caleb." My blood boiled, but I kept my voice low. "I'm tending my dad's garden. You wouldn't understand." She stepped closer, her eyes glinting. "Oh, I understand. You're a nobody. Lauren, clinging to a house that's mine now. Get over it." I gripped the trowel tighter, my knuckles white. She had no idea, and her arrogance made me want to scream the truth. But I remembered Dad's words, stand firm but kind. I wasn't sure I could be kind anymore. Clara's car pulled up, saving me from saying something I'd regret. She waved her silver hair, catching the sun, but her face was tense. I walked over, leaving Miranda on the deck. Clara leaned close, her voice low. I heard Miranda at the diner cozying up to some lawyer named Nathan. They were talking about the house Lauren. Something about ownership papers. My stomach dropped. Nathan. A lawyer. This wasn't just gossip. Miranda was planning something. Thanks, Clara, I said, my voice shaky. I'll handle it. She squeezed my arm, her eyes soft. Be careful, honey. I nodded, but my mind was racing. Miranda wasn't just disrespecting me. She was trying to steal what was mine. I glanced back at the deck, but she'd gone inside, probably plotting her next move. I shoved the trowel into the dirt harder than I meant and kept working the roses, blurring as my eyes stung. Later, I found Caleb in the garage, tinkering with his old bike. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Caleb, we need to talk about Miranda. He didn't look up, just kept tightening a bolt. You're overreacting, Lauren. She's just protective of our space. Protective? I snapped, stepping closer. She's telling people I'm a freeloader, Caleb. She's talking to a lawyer about the house. His wrench stopped, but he still wouldn't meet my eyes. You're blowing this out of proportion, he said, his voice tight. Let her feel at home, okay? I stared at him, my heart cracking. This was my brother, the one I'd shared secrets with, the one who'd leaned on me when Dad died. Now he was dismissing me, choosing her lies over our bond. I'm not the one causing problems, I said, my voice breaking. You are by letting her do this. He stood wiping his hands on a rag and finally looked at me. Just drop it, Lauren. You're making it worse. He walked past me into the house, leaving me alone in the dim garage. I sank onto a stool, the smell of oil and metal sharp in my nose. Caleb wasn't just silent anymore. He was against me. And Miranda was moving faster than I'd realized, her claws sinking deeper into my home, my family, my life. I left the garage, my boots crunching on the gravel driveway. Caleb's words looping in my head. The air felt thick, like it was pressing me down. I got in my car but didn't start it, just sat there staring at the house. The front porch light flickered, the one Dad never got around to fixing. I wanted to go back to make Caleb see what Miranda was doing, but his dismissal had carved something out of me. I drove off the radio, off the silence, loud with my thoughts. That evening I got a call from Hannah. Her voice was soft, careful, like she was stepping around glass. Lauren, I talked to Caleb at the store today. He's different. Said you're making things hard for Miranda. I gripped the phone, my kitchen counter cold under my elbow. Hard for her, I said, my voice sharper than I meant. She's the one lying about me, Hannah. He didn't mention that, she sighed. He just said you're stuck in the past, holding on to the house like it's all you've got. I paced my apartment, the hardwood creaking under my steps. Stuck in the past. The house wasn't just some relic. It was Dad's laughter, our late-night talks, the place we rebuilt after Mom left. Caleb knew that, or he used to. Now he was parroting Miranda's poison, and it burned deeper than her words ever could. I sank into a chair, my hands twisting in my lap. I'd always been the strong one, the one who held us together when Dad got sick. Now I was the problem. The next day I forced myself to go to the house, hoping to catch Caleb alone. Instead, I found Miranda hosting a barbecue, the backyard filled with neighbors I'd known since I was a kid. She was all smiles, passing out burgers, acting like she'd lived here forever. I stood by the gate unnoticed, watching her pour wine for Mrs. Ellis, who used to braid my hair. Miranda's voice carried bright and loud. "Oh, we're planning to make this place our own soon," she said. "It's time for a fresh start." My stomach churned. She was claiming my home right in front of everyone, and no one blinked. I scanned the crowd for Caleb, but he was off to the side. Flipping burgers, his shoulders hunched. I started to walk over, but then I heard her again, her tone shifting lower, meant for the group around her. "It's such a shame Lauren's so clingy," she said, sighing like she cared. "She's got no direction, just keeps showing up here." A few heads nodded, and I felt my face burn, my breath catching. I turned to leave my sandals silent on the grass, but Clara caught my arm. Her eyes were fierce, her voice a whisper. "She's been at it all day, Lauren. Told folks you're trying to guilt Caleb into keeping you around." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak, and slipped away before anyone else saw me. In my car, I gripped the steering wheel, my nails digging into my palms. Miranda wasn't just taking the house. She was taking my name, my place in this town. I drove to Paul's office, my dad's old friend, the only person I could think to turn to. His law office smelled of leather and coffee, and he listened as I spilled everything: Miranda's lies, Caleb's betrayal, the lawyer Clara mentioned. Paul leaned back, his glasses glinting. "Your deed's solid, Lauren," he said. "But if she's digging with some lawyer, you need to be ready. They might try to challenge it, claim tenancy or some nonsense." I nodded, my hands clammy. Ready for what I asked. He sighed. "For a fight." That night I lay awake, the streetlights casting shadows on my ceiling. Miranda's voice at the barbecue echoed her fake pity, cutting deeper than her insults. Caleb's hunched shoulders, his refusal to look at me, hurt worse. I thought of Dad, how he'd trusted me to keep the house safe, and now it felt like I was failing him. The betrayal wasn't just Miranda's. It was Caleb's, and it was tearing me apart piece by quiet piece. The living room felt smaller, the air thick with the scent of Miranda's new citrus diffuser. I stood by the coffee table, my hands sweaty, clutching a folder Paul had helped me prepare. I'd come to talk to Caleb to lay out boundaries, but Miranda was waiting, perched on the arm of the sofa like a queen. Her eyes flicked to me, cold and smug. Before I could speak, she slid a manila envelope across the table. "Lauren, this is for you," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "A notice to vacate our house." My heart stopped, then pounded. I opened the envelope, scanning the typed letter inside. It was a formal demand signed by her and some lawyer named Nathan, claiming I was an unwelcome guest trespassing on their property. The words blurred my pulse, roaring in my ears. This was my house, Dad's house, the one I'd poured my heart into keeping whole. And she thought she could evict me. Miranda leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping the table. "You've been a burden long enough," she said. "It's time you left us alone." I looked at Caleb, slouched in the armchair, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Say something," I said, my voice shaking. He shifted, muttering, "Lauren, maybe it's for the best." My chest caved. My brother, my ally, was handing me over to her. I set the notice down, my hands trembling, but my resolve hardening. "Miranda, you don't own this house," I said, slow and clear. "I do." Her laugh was sharp, slicing through the room. "Oh, please. You're delusional. This is our home, and you're nothing but a clingy pest." She stood, crossing her arms. "I'm done being nice. Get out, or I'm calling the police to drag you out." My breath caught, rage and pain colliding. I'd held back for Caleb, for Dad's memory, but she'd crossed a line. "You're making a mistake," I said, my voice low, almost a growl. She smirked, pulling out her phone. "Try me," she said, dialing. Caleb stood, his face pale. "Miranda, wait," he said, but she waved him off. "No, Caleb. She's done here." I heard the call connect, her voice crisp as she spoke to the dispatcher. "Yes, I need officers at my house. There's a woman refusing to leave our property." I stood frozen, the room spinning. My home, my sanctuary, and she was turning it into a battlefield. I glanced at the folder in my hands, the deed inside my proof. But the weight of Caleb's silence, his refusal to fight for me, hit harder than her threats. Clara's voice echoed in my mind, her warning about Nathan and Miranda's plans. I'd been naive, thinking I could reason with her, that Caleb would snap out of it. Now she was calling the police, banking on her lies to win. My eyes landed on a new painting above the mantel, a gaudy, abstract thing Miranda had hung where Dad's family portrait used to be. It was like she'd erased us, rewritten our story in her image. Miranda hung up, her smile triumphant. "They're on their way," she said. "You should have left when I asked nicely." I stared at her, my heart hammering, every fiber of me screaming to fight back. I opened the folder, my fingers brushing the deed, but I didn't pull it out. Not yet. Let her think she'd won. Let her dig her own grave. But inside, I was breaking the betrayal of my brother and the violation of my home tearing me apart. The front door opened and 2 officers stepped into the living room, their boots heavy on the floorboards. Miranda's face lit up, her voice syrupy as she gestured toward me. "Officers, thank you for coming. This woman's been harassing us, refusing to leave our property." My stomach twisted, her lies coiling tighter around me. I stood rooted, the folder with the deed burning in my hands, but my eyes darted to Caleb. He was frozen by the stairs, his jaw tight, looking like a stranger. The older officer, a man with graying hair, glanced at me. "Ma'am, can you explain your side?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Before I could speak, Miranda cut in, her voice rising. "She's my husband's sister, always hanging around acting like she owns the place. It's pathetic. She's got no claim here." The younger officer nodded, scribbling in his notebook, and I felt the room shrink, the walls closing in. I opened my mouth, but Miranda kept going, her words a flood. "She's been a problem for months, officers. We've been patient, but she's unstable, showing up uninvited, touching our things." My breath hitched, her accusations slicing deeper than I'd thought possible. Unstable, I'd spent years keeping this house alive, paying taxes, fixing leaks, all while letting them live here for free. And now she was painting me as a lunatic in front of men who didn't know me. Caleb shifted his hands in his pockets. "Miranda, maybe we can talk this out," he mumbled, but his voice was weak, drowned by her glare. "No, Caleb," she said, turning to the officers. "She needs to go. Now." I looked at him, pleading with my eyes for him to stand up, to tell the truth. But he dropped his gaze, his shoulders slumping. My heart cracked, the last thread of hope I had for him snapping. The older officer turned to me again. "Ma'am, do you have any documentation proving your right to be here?" he asked. I nodded, my throat dry, and opened the folder, pulling out the deed. "This is my house," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "My name's on the title." I handed it over, my hands shaking. The officer took it, his eyes scanning the paper, but Miranda laughed loud and mocking. "That's fake," she said, stepping closer, her perfume sharp in the air. "She's desperate, making things up. Officers, don't waste your time." My cheeks burned, humiliation flooding me. I saw Clara outside the window, her face pale, watching from the porch. She'd warned me, but I hadn't expected this, not the police, not Miranda's brazen lies in front of everyone. The neighbors' faces flashed in my mind, the ones she'd charmed at her barbecue, probably believing her now. The younger officer looked at the deed, then at me, his brow furrowing. "We'll need to verify this," he said. But Miranda interrupted, her voice shrill. "Verify what? She's a liar. This is our home." Her confidence, her absolute certainty made my knees weak. I'd never felt so small, so erased, standing in the house I'd fought to protect. Caleb's silence was louder than her screams, his betrayal. A weight I couldn't carry anymore. I clutched the folder, my nails digging into the cardboard as the officers exchanged a glance. The room spun, Miranda's voice fading into a dull roar. I was losing everything, my home, my brother, my place in the world, and all I could do was stand there, the deed, in someone else's hands, my heart shattered on the floor. I drove back to my apartment, the officers' voices still ringing in my ears. Miranda's smirk burned into my mind. My hands shook as I unlocked the door, the folder with the deed tucked under my arm like a shield. Inside, I dropped onto the couch, the quiet of my space swallowing me. The humiliation of standing in my own home, labeled a liar, a trespasser, clawed at me. But beneath it, something else stirred, a spark, small but fierce. I was done letting Miranda rewrite my story. I pulled out a box from under my bed, one I hadn't touched in months. It held Dad's letters, his handwriting jagged from the days he was too weak to hold a pen steady. I sifted through them, looking for something to anchor me. One envelope caught my eye, my name scrawled in his careful script. I opened it, unfolding a single page. "Lauren, you're stronger than you know," he'd written. "Protect what matters, even when it's hard." I traced the words, my throat tight. He'd believed in me, and I'd been hiding from that strength too long. I grabbed my laptop and started drafting a letter to Caleb and Miranda. My fingers hovered over the keys, the weight of what I was about to do settling in. This is my house. I typed my name on the deed, my responsibility. You have 30 days to move out or sign a lease and pay rent. No more free rides. The words felt final, like closing a door I'd left open too long. I wasn't just reclaiming the house, I was reclaiming myself. My phone buzzed, pulling me back. It was Clara, her voice steady but urgent. Lauren, I found a realtor who can appraise the house if you need options. Her name's Tessa, lives on Oak Street. I thanked her, jotting down the number. Selling wasn't my plan, but knowing the house's value could give me leverage. I called Tessa and she agreed to meet tomorrow, her voice warm and no nonsense. It's a hot market, she said. You might be surprised what it's worth. I hung up, my mind racing. For years, I'd put Caleb first, letting him lean on me while I swallowed my own needs. Dad had trusted me to keep the house safe, not to let it become a battleground. But Caleb's silence in front of the police, his choice to let Miranda humiliate me, had changed something. I wasn't just fighting for the house anymore. I was fighting for the woman Dad raised me to be. I walked to the kitchen, pouring a glass of tea, the clink of ice steadying me. Hannah's warning about Caleb cutting ties echoed, and I felt a pang of guilt. Was I pushing him away? I shoved the thought down. He'd made his choice standing by while Miranda tried to erase me. I sat back at the laptop, rereading the letter. It was firm but fair, exactly what Dad would have done. I saved it, my resolve growing, a quiet strength taking root. The clock on the wall ticked, its rhythm slow and sure. I thought of the house, its worn steps, the backyard where Dad taught me to plant seeds. Miranda thought she could take it, but she didn't know me, not really. I wasn't the clingy sister she mocked. I was the one who'd kept the lights on, who'd honored Dad's legacy, and I was ready to show her. I woke early, the sky still gray outside my window, and printed the letter I'd drafted. The paper felt heavy, like it carried years of unspoken truths. I slipped it into an envelope, my fingers steady, and drove to a cafe downtown, a neutral spot away from the house's ghosts. Caleb had agreed to meet, though his text was curt, reluctant. I arrived first, choosing a corner table by a window streaked with morning mist. The smell of fresh coffee grounded me, but my pulse raced, knowing this conversation could break us. Caleb walked in, his jacket, rumpled, Dad's old watch glinting on his wrist. He slid into the seat across from me, avoiding my eyes. "What's this about Lauren?" he asked, his voice low, defensive. I set the envelope between us, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. "This is for you and Miranda," I said. "Read it." He frowned, opening it slowly, his eyes scanning the words. His face tightened, a flush creeping up his neck. "You're kicking us out," he said, his voice rising, drawing a glance from the barista. "You're serious?" I leaned forward, keeping my tone even. "I'm giving you 30 days to move or pay rent, Caleb. This is my house, and I'm done letting Miranda walk over me." He shook his head, shoving the letter back. "You're destroying my marriage, Lauren. She's my wife. You can't do this." His words stung, but I didn't flinch. "I'm doing what Dad asked me to," I said. "Protecting what's mine." He leaned back, his hands clenched. "You're so selfish," he said, his voice bitter. "Always playing the martyr, holding the house over my head." I swallowed hard, the accusation cutting deep. Selfish, I'd let them live rent-free, swallowed Miranda's insults, all to keep him close. But I saw it now, he wasn't the brother I'd fought for anymore. "I'm not the one tearing us apart," I said, my voice quiet but sharp. "You did that when you let her lie about me." My phone buzzed, a text from Tessa. "Appraisal's done. House is worth more than we thought. Call me." I glanced at it, then back at Caleb, a new clarity settling in. The house wasn't just a memory. It was power, leverage, a choice I could make. I could sell it, start fresh, or keep it and set boundaries. Either way, it was mine to decide, not Miranda's, not Caleb's. Miranda texted me. Then her words popping up on my screen. "Lauren, I'm sorry if I was harsh. Can we talk?" I stared at it. Her fake softness so transparent it almost made me laugh. She was scrambling, sensing the ground shift. I didn't reply, pocketing the phone. Caleb watched me, his jaw tight. "You're really going through with this," he said, not a question. I nodded, my eyes locked on his. I have to, I said. For me. I stood leaving the letter on the table and walked out the cafe door, chiming behind me. The air was crisp, the street waking up with delivery trucks and dog walkers. I stopped by my car, my breath visible in the cold. I thought of Dad, how he'd faced his illness with quiet courage, never shouting, just standing firm. I wasn't shouting either, but I was standing finally for myself. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands steady on the wheel, and drove toward Tessa's office, ready to face whatever came next. I stood on the porch of the house, the morning air sharp with the scent of damp leaves. Inside boxes were stacked against the walls, Miranda's neat handwriting labeling them in black marker. My letter had set things in motion, and now they were packing the reality of my decision sinking in. I'd driven over to check on the progress, but part of me dreaded seeing Caleb, his anger from the cafe still raw in my memory. The front door was ajar, and I stepped inside, my sneakers quiet on the hardwood. Miranda was in the dining room taping a box shut, her movements brisk. She looked up, her eyes narrowing, but her usual venom was gone, replaced by something colder, calculated. "Lauren," she said, her voice flat. "I didn't expect you." I nodded, keeping my distance. "Just checking on the house," I said. Her lips pressed into a thin line and she set the tape down. "We're leaving like you wanted. But I have an offer." She pulled an envelope from her purse and slid it across the table. "I can buy the house," she said. "Cash, quick deal. It's better for everyone." I stared at the envelope, my pulse quickening. The number she named was laughably low, barely half what Tessa's appraisal had shown. She was trying to salvage her pride to turn my victory into her gain. I shook my head, my voice steady. "The house isn't for sale, Miranda. Not to you." Her face tightened, a flush creeping up her cheeks. "You're making a mistake," she said, her tone sharp but controlled. "You'll regret this." I met her gaze, unflinching. "I've regretted plenty," I said. "Letting you disrespect me was one. This isn't." She turned away, grabbing another box, but the air between us crackled with her frustration, her plan unraveling. I walked outside, needing space, and found Clara waiting by her mailbox, her coat buttoned against the chill. She waved me over, her eyes bright with news. "Lauren, I talked to some folks at the community center," she said. "They know Miranda's been lying about you. I'm setting up a meeting tonight to clear your name." I smiled, gratitude warming me. "Thanks, Clara," I said. "That means a lot." She patted my arm. "You're your father's daughter," she said. "He'd be proud." Back at my car, my phone buzzed with a call from Caleb. His voice was strained, almost pleading. "Lauren, can we have a little more time? Miranda's freaking out and I don't know what to do." I leaned against the car, the metal cold through my jacket. My instinct was to soften, to give him what he wanted, like always. But I thought of Dad, his letter, his trust in me. 2 weeks, I said. "Sign the lease or you're out." He went quiet, then hung up. I drove to the park near the house where Dad used to take us to feed the ducks. I sat on a bench watching the water ripple under the breeze. The weight of Caleb's plea, Miranda's offer, and Clara's support pressed on me. I'd drawn a line and they were feeling it, but so was I. The house was mine, but it came with a cost I hadn't expected, a fracture I couldn't mend. I left the park, the chill of the bench lingering in my bones, and drove back to the house one last time before the deadline. The street was quiet, the neighbor's dog barking faintly in the distance. I parked and stepped out, noticing the empty driveway. Caleb and Miranda were gone. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn, like the house was holding its breath. I unlocked the door, the familiar creak echoing in the stillness, and stepped into a space that felt both mine and foreign. The living room was bare, the walls stripped of Miranda's decorations, leaving faint outlines where her frames had hung. A single box sat by the stairs, unmarked, forgotten in their rush. I opened it, finding a worn baseball glove, Caleb's, from when we were kids. My fingers brushed the leather stiff from years in the attic, and a memory flickered him, tossing a ball to me in the backyard, Dad cheering from the porch. I set it down, my chest tight. On the kitchen counter, I found a note in Caleb's messy scrawl. "Lauren, I'm sorry. You're right about the house, but you broke us. I can't fix this." I read it twice, each word a small cut. He blamed me, not Miranda, not himself. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket, its weight heavier than the glove. The silence of the house pressed in, amplifying the ache of his words. My phone buzzed with the text from Tessa. New tenants are ready to sign. Can you meet tomorrow? I stared at the screen, the reality of moving forward settling in. The young couple she'd found wanted to rent to fill this place with their own laughter, their own life. It was what I'd chosen, but standing here surrounded by echoes of my past, it felt like letting go of something I couldn't name. I walked upstairs, my steps slow, and paused at the door to Dad's old room. It was empty now, the bed stripped, the closet yawning open. I remembered sitting there with him, his voice weak but steady, telling me to hold on to what mattered. I'd kept the house, but Caleb's note made me wonder if I'd lost more than I'd saved. His absence, his blame, was a wound I hadn't seen coming. Clara called as I locked up, her voice bright with news. Lauren, that lawyer Nathan's in trouble, she said. Paul filed a complaint and the bar's investigating. He's done messing with you. I managed to thank you, but my mind was elsewhere, stuck on the note, on the glove, on the empty rooms. Miranda's schemes were crumbling, but it didn't fill the hole Caleb had left. I stepped onto the porch, the night air cool against my face. The stars were out faint above the streetlights, and I thought of Dad, how he'd point out constellations when I was small. I'd won the house set boundaries, cleared my name, but victory tasted bitter. Caleb's words hung over me, a quiet accusation I couldn't shake. I got in my car, the engine's hum the only sound, and drove away, the house fading in the dark, my heart heavy with what I'd gained and what I'd lost. I pulled up to the house, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the lawn. The new tenants, a young couple named Ellie and Marcus, had moved in a week ago, and I'd promised to stop by to see how they were settling. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass, a neighbor's mower humming down the street. I knocked and Ellie opened the door, her smile wide, a flour-dusted apron tied around her waist. Lauren, come in, she said, waving me inside. We're baking cookies. The living room felt different, alive with their touches, a woven rug, a shelf of colorful books. I followed Ellie to the kitchen where Marcus was kneading dough, his sleeves rolled up. The warmth of the oven and the scent of vanilla wrapped around me, softening the edges of my heart. They'd hung a small chalkboard by the fridge, scribbled with grocery lists and silly notes to each other. It was their home now, and it felt right. We sat at the table, a plate of warm cookies between us, and they told me about their plans, a vegetable patch in the spring, a reading nook upstairs. Then Ellie hesitated, her eyes soft. We found something in the backyard, she said. Come see. I followed them outside, the grass cool under my shoes, to Dad's old garden. A sapling stood there, its leaves tender and green, a tag tied to its trunk. For George, it read in Marcus's careful handwriting. I touched the tag, my throat tightening. They'd never met Dad, but they'd heard my stories, seen his mark on this place. We wanted to honor him, Marcus said, his voice quiet. This tree's a start. I nodded, words failing me, the gesture sinking deep. The garden, once a battleground with Miranda, was healing, growing something new. I looked at the sapling, its roots already taking hold, and felt a weight lift just a little. Back inside, my phone buzzed with a text from Clara. Potluck tonight at the community center. You're coming, right? I smiled, typing a quick yes. She'd rallied the neighbors to set the record straight about Miranda's lies, and I'd heard whispers of apologies from folks who'd believed her. The town was stitching itself back together, and I was part of it again, not the outcast she'd tried to make me. As I drove to the community center, the sky turned pink, the horizon soft. I thought of the sapling, of Ellie and Marcus building a life in Dad's house. I'd fought for that place, not just for me, but for what it could be, a home, a haven for someone else. The hurt of Caleb's note. His absence still lingered, but it was quieter now, less like a blade and more like a bruise. I was learning to carry it, to let it be part of me without defining me. I parked and stepped out, the potluck's chatter spilling through the open doors. Clara waved me over, her laughter bright, and I felt something settle, a calm I hadn't known I'd been chasing. The fight was over, but the healing was just beginning, and I was ready to walk toward it, one slow step at a time. The community center buzzed with warmth, the long tables covered in checkered cloths and piled with casseroles and pies. I stood by Clara, a glass of iced tea in my hand, as neighbors milled around their voices, a soft hum of laughter and stories. Mrs. Ellis, who'd once nodded at Miranda's lies, approached me, her eyes crinkling with regret. "Lauren, I'm sorry I got it wrong about you," she said, her hand light on my arm. "You're welcome here always." I smiled, the knot in my chest loosening, and thanked her, my voice steady. Clara pulled me aside, her grin wide. "I've got an idea," she whispered. "A newsletter for the neighborhood to keep us connected. I want you to design it. Your eye for detail, it's perfect." I blinked, surprised, the offer sparking something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. "I'm in," I said, and she clapped, her enthusiasm infectious. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged not just to the house, but to this place, these people. Later, I stepped outside, the night air cool, the stars brighter now. I leaned against the railing, thinking of Hannah's call earlier. She'd heard Caleb was in therapy, struggling but trying to find his way. The news didn't erase the hurt of his note, but it softened the edges like a stone smoothed by a river. I pulled out a small notebook from my purse and wrote a letter to him, my pen moving slow. "Caleb, I forgive you," I wrote. "I hope you find what you're looking for. I don't know if I'll send it, but I needed to say it to let it go." I tucked the notebook away and walked to my car, the gravel crunching under my boots. At home, I opened a drawer and found a wooden frame, simple and worn, one Dad had made in his workshop. I slipped in a sketch I'd drawn years ago, a rough outline of the house with its sloped roof and wide porch. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, mine, a piece of me I'd carried through the storm. I hung it above my desk, the wood catching the lamplight, and stood back, my breath slow. Paul called as I was brewing coffee, his voice calm but excited. "Lauren, I've been thinking," he said. "You've got a knack for managing property. Let me teach you the ropes, maybe start a side business." I laughed, the idea both daunting and thrilling. "Let me think about it," I said, but I was already imagining it, a new path opening, one I'd never considered before. I sat by the window, the city lights flickering below, and thought of the journey ahead. I'd planned a trip to Dad's favorite lake, a place he'd taken us to fish and dream. I'd go alone, not to mourn, but to carry him with me, to listen to the water and find my own rhythm. The house was safe, the tenants building their life, the town reclaiming me. Caleb's path was his own now, and I was okay with that, not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd learned to hold my own heart. I closed my eyes, the hum of the night wrapping around me, and felt a quiet peace settle, like the first deep breath after a long climb. I was still here, still standing, and that was enough. I pulled into the gravel lot by Dad's favorite lake, the water shimmering under the early morning sun. My backpack held a small thermos of coffee, a notebook, and a packet of wildflower seeds I'd bought on a whim. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I walked to the shore, my boots sinking slightly into the soft ground, and found a flat rock to sit on. The lake was still reflecting the clouds, and for the first time in months I felt my shoulders loosen. I poured coffee into the thermos lid, the steam curling in the cool air, and opened my notebook. I'd started writing again, not designs or work notes, but thoughts, fragments of who I was becoming. The house, Caleb, Miranda, they'd shaped me, but they weren't all of me. I jotted down a line, "I'm more than what I've lost." It felt true, raw, like a seed taking root. The lake stretched wide, its surface unbroken except for a lone duck gliding near the reeds. I thought of the tenants, Ellie and Marcus, how they'd invited me for dinner last week, their table crowded with mismatched plates and stories of their dreams. Their joy in the house, my house, had settled something in me. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was a gift I'd given, a choice I'd made to let it live beyond my pain. I reached for the wildflower seeds, tearing open the packet. Dad used to say this lake was his church, a place to think, to feel whole. I scattered the seeds along the bank, their tiny shapes catching the light before sinking into the soil. It was small, this act, but it felt like a promise to him, to myself, that I'd keep growing no matter what came. The wind picked up, rippling the water, and I watched the seeds settle, trusting they'd find their way. My phone buzzed in my pocket, A text from Clara Newsletters, a hit people love your designs. I smiled, warmth spreading through me. The project with her had become a quiet anchor, a way to weave myself back into the community. I wasn't just the woman who'd fought for her house. I was someone building something new, line by line, page by page. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me, and looked out at the lake. The fight with Miranda, Caleb's note, the police in my living room, they were part of my story, but they didn't own it. I'd spent so long guarding the house, guarding my heart, that I'd forgotten how to let go, how to trust myself to start again. Now sitting here, I felt the edges of that trust, fragile but real. A fish jumped, breaking the water's calm, and I laughed softly, the sound surprising me. I closed my notebook, my fingers brushing the cover, and stood stretching my arms toward the sky. The lake glowed, the world wide and open, and I took a slow breath, letting the moment hold me steady and quiet before I turned to walk back to my car. I drove back from the lake, the road winding through fields dappled with late summer light. My hands rested easy on the wheel, the hum of the engine a quiet companion. At home, I lit a single candle, its soft glow flickering across my small dining table. I sat with a cup of chamomile tea, the steam curling upward, and opened my sketchbook to a blank page. I drew a simple horizon line, the curve of a hill, not to capture anything grand, but to mark this moment, this stillness I'd found. Hannah had called earlier, her voice tentative but hopeful. "Caleb's doing better," she said. "He asked about you, wants to reach out soon." I'd listened, my heart steady, no longer racing at his name. I wasn't waiting for him anymore, not out of anger, but because I'd learned to stand without him. The house, the fight, the years of holding on, they'd taught me something I hadn't seen coming. Owning my life didn't mean owning everything, just choosing what to carry and what to set free. I thought of the wildflower seeds by the lake, how they'd bloom or fade on their own. That was the lesson, wasn't it? You fight for what's yours, not to win, but to know you can. Miranda's lies. Caleb's silence, they'd hurt, but they'd also shown me my own strength, the kind that doesn't shout, just stays. I'd stood my ground, not with rage, but with a quiet certainty, and that had changed me more than any victory could. The candle flickered, casting shadows on the wall, and I closed my sketchbook. I'd spent so long afraid of losing Dad, the house, my brother, that I'd forgotten how to live without fear. Now, with the tenants building their life, Clara's newsletter growing, and Paul's offer to mentor me, I saw a path forward, not perfect, but mine. The deepest betrayals, the ones that cut to the bone, don't just break you. They show you what you're made of, what you can rebuild. I stood and walked to the window, the city lights soft below. The world felt bigger now, not because I'd won, but because I'd let go of needing to. I was enough, not because of the house or Caleb's approval, but because I'd chosen myself over and over through the hurt and the doubt. That was the freedom I hadn't known I was fighting for. What's the moment that taught you who you really are? The one that made you see your own strength, even if it hurt? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. If this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for carrying your own light. Here's to healing, to growing, and to finding peace in the quiet moments. Good night.